Everybody's been asking for this video. We did a frameless upper cabinet. Now we're doing a frameless base cabinet. And stay tuned for this video because I go through step by step how I build a base. In the video I'm going to cover, because a lot of people have asked, do you do a full 3/4 or a 1/2 inch top on a base cabinet? Absolutely not. Your countertop has to breathe. Okay, you need the circulation, especially if you're going to put granite on top. So the way I always have built this, I got a full 3/4 bottom, 3/4 sides, but all my nailers, the front nailer, the back nailer, I have edge banding on both, but I've always made it so I have a removable back as well. And it's just a super simple build with 2 wall nailers. So I cover all of it in the video. We're building a cabinet today, and there's a certain process you have to go through to end up with the finished cabinet. Here's the basic bones, a sheet of plywood. But the process is simple. No matter how you build a cabinet, you gotta rip your plywood, you gotta cross cut your plywood, you have to edge band your plywood, you gotta groove your plywood for your backs, you have to punch your system 32mm holes, you have to do your joinery, and you have to do your assembly. It's really easy process. Now, there are different ways, as I have always taught people, to skin the cat. Okay? It's the tools you use to do it. I like to simplify my process, and this is the way I've built cabinets for a long, long time. And I am building a base cabinet. You'll look back in our subscription feed for you on our SedgeTool YouTube channel, and you will see that there's a full cabinet build. That's the upper cabinet, a frameless upper cabinet. Today, I'm going to show you how to build a frameless base cabinet. What I like to do is I just like to take the limit stop like this and make sure I get the perfect offset like this, and let's get ripping. So now we're going to set up the parallel guide so I can get those 600mm rips, and it's just real easy. Set it in, lock it in, turn this, and set it at 600. The setting for 600 is right here on the middle of that cursor. So my frameless base cabinet, the depth, and this is what my rips are going to be, are 600mm. For those using Imperial, it's 23 5/8. And as we build the cabinet, I'll explain all the dimensions so you can see why I have built it in the height we're going to build it, and in the width, and in the depth. Okay, because of course what's going to go on top of the base cabinet is a countertop. And if you go into your kitchen now or a vanity and you measure it, it's going to be between 35 inches and 36 inches. All right, so we have our 2 600mm rips. Here's a quick tip for you. If you're building a lot of cabinets and you've got a lot of different measurements, always label everything. So you can see here I got 600 and I've labeled this 600. Now, out of one piece, as I explained a few minutes ago, we're going to get 2 sides and a bottom. So out of a 4x8 sheet, you can basically get what? 2 base cabinets. So let's go over here. Now, I always have scrap plywood kicking around. And then sometimes I'll spend a few moments here and there because I'll rip everything at what? Come in here. 100mm. That's basically 4 inches. And that's what I like to make my spanners or slash nailers. And on this base cabinet, there's no top. There's 2 countertop nailers and 2 wall nailers in back. And you'll see how you build a cabinet in this orientation. And later on in the video, I'll show you why. So I just have this piece of scrap, and I'm just going to rip 4-inch or 100mm nailers. But you can also use that for what? Toe kick, when you're building toe kicks. So you see how it's all those basic measurements. The upper cabinet's 300mm of depth. These are 600mm of depth. Hey, as I'm cutting down this piece for our nailers for the cabinet, I thought I'd give you another tip. All right, now look, see, I've just ripped 2 out of this piece of material here, right? I want to get a third. So I've taken an offcut, and what I'll do is I often get this question, I'll do that so I can back the board so that rail is nice and stable and doesn't tilt as I'm ripping. We're going to do our cross cuts now, and the sides are going to be 768 millimeter. I have this tape right here, and this is how I can reference it into imperial for you. 768 is your basic height of your base cabinet with a separate toe kick, and that equates to 30 1/4. So we're gonna add a toe kick to that, or build one. You've seen the toe kick video that we've produced. It's 100 millimeters. That's 4 inches roughly. Okay, so let's do this in imperial. 30 1/4 for our sides, plus the toe kick, 4 inches, is 34 1/4. Now, what's gonna go on top of that base cabinet and toe kick is what? Is your countertop, be it granite, solid surface, mica, whatever your buildup is. And that's usually 1.5 inches. So let's do the math on that. 30 1/4 plus 4 inches plus 1.5 inches equals 35 3/4. Now go into your kitchen, because I know you got one. Walk up to it, take a measurement to the top of that countertop, and it's always between 35 and 36 inches. Okay, now if you want the overall in metric, it's about 900 millimeter, thereabouts. Okay, so now let's talk about, sorry to be confusing, but let's talk about the width. Okay, we know the height, we know the depth, but the width is, I like to keep it the same. Okay, it's basically the same because when I look at a kitchen, and if I have the perfect lineup, my upper cabinet, I look down, this will be a full overlay. My base cabinet is the same width as my upper. So when I build those over the years, I build them the same dimension. So this is 18 millimeter plywood, so add 18 and 18 and you get what? And then I need to make it 768, so I subtract that number, 18, which is 36. So 768 is what I want the overall, so I'll cut my bottom and my nailers at 732 millimeter. And you'll see that in the next segment. But the first thing you always got to do is start from square. So let's square this end here, or this piece, and then we'll flip it around and do our incremental cuts. So let's mark our first board, which are going to be our sides. And those are 768 millimeter or 30 1/4. Okay, so there's 700, look, there's 68, and look, there's a little diamond there. That means it's an increment of 32 millimeter. So we set that mark, that witness mark right there, to our splinter guard. Here's what you have to do. You have to make sure that it's up against this fence, there's no sawdust, and set your repeatable stop, and because we need 2 of them, and they need to be exactly the same. So I just marked my board for my bottom, and remember, it's going to be pinned between the sides. So I'm going to cut this, and I measured and I marked it at 732. I'm going to bring my rail down and my splinter guard right up to the mark. I always like to split my mark like that. And don't forget, bring that right on in. So if you have to do a bunch of bottoms, you have it right there. All right, so I need to cut these 100 millimeter tall or wide by the same increment of 732 that I cut the bottom. And I need 4 of these. So I've already squared one in. Let's cut those. Okay, step number 3, edge banding. And then we clip the edges. Okay. All right, we did two sides. We did the edge banding on the front edge and on the bottom, because that's what you're gonna see when you open the doors of the base cabinet. But you're gonna also see two of the nailers. Two of them will be hidden, but the other two, and I'm just gonna show you right here, this is where your countertop is gonna go on. You'll see this is your lead edge, and there'll be another one back here. So what I like to do is I like to edge band these, just in case somebody looks inside your cabinet all the way up back inside. They won't see the plywood, they'll see edge banding. To do this, it's really difficult with the Conturo edge bander because that plate lays on here and it's really hard to manipulate with clamps. So what I like to do is I like to go to my Conturo MFT table for these pieces. So we rip, we cross cut, we edge banded, and now it's time for grooving. So what we're doing is we're gonna groove for the back. This is a piece of the back. We'll cut this shortly. But I wanna explain the difference between a groove and a dado. A lot of people don't know the difference, and it's pretty simple. When I go across the grain of something, that's called a dado. When I go with the grain, it's called a groove. It sounds like they're the same thing, but it's just, you know, potato, potato, right? So what I want to point out is we're going to do what is known as a captured back in between the countertop nailer and the wall nailer. So this is the wall nailer, okay, and it's 18 millimeters, and I did the layout here. Then we're going to put in that piece of plywood that is 6 millimeters. All right, so we need to line this up absolutely perfect to cut that, because that's the inside of our cabinet. Okay. So to do the groove, it's pretty simple. I did a little bit of math. 18 plus 6 is 24. That's that line, okay? But what we do is we work off a center line in the SedgeTool shop. The beauty of the MFK 700 is there's actually a center line on here. So what I will show you on this is we will line this up off of center line right here and get an absolutely perfect groove with the parallel guide. And that's your micro just in case we need it. But there you go, and I don't need it, and it'll be perfect. For the groove, I've inserted a 6 millimeter bit in there to accept the plywood, and I've set the height at 9 millimeter or 3/8. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to mention a little bit earlier is you can see this is our front edge. That's where I have the edge banding. And if you have a lot of these to do, mark your boards. I always mark the back where I'm going to put my parallel guide, and verify your veneer that this is the inside. So that's my mark I always have when I'm using the parallel guide, and I'm running where I want my groove. So the next step of the process is punching our system holes, the 32 millimeter holes, or spacing of 5 millimeter holes on a 32 millimeter system. Okay, now there's some standards involved here. Like from the front of the cabinet, the first series of holes, and I drew a line here, is 37 millimeters to the center of the hole. And what goes in those holes are like shelf pins in those 5 millimeter holes, hinge plates, shelf pins, and also drawer slides. Okay, so the other holes from the back of a cabinet, say I had a rabbited back, half-inch back. I'm going to use, remember we grooved this for a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter back. So from here to here is 18 millimeters. And then we add the 6 to this edge here, and we came up with 24 plus 37 is 61. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our posts and put them in here with our rail at 37 millimeter. Okay, but we're going to put it right in the groove. So that'll bring that line at 61. Because when you open a cabinet from here to here will be 37 millimeter. It'll just look aesthetically correct. Now, there's another set of lines that I want to punch in to the base cabinet. And you've seen it before, where you open up a base cabinet, and guess what there is? A half shelf. So when you look at the front, you have an adjustable shelf that you can put smaller pieces, pots and pans up here. So I want to show you in this video how to capture this line with the LR32 system using the parallel edge stops and the 32 millimeter spacing hole rail. So in the description of the video, there is an LR32 setup video on how to calibrate and work with the rail and the 1400 router. Good. I scribed on this, remember it's 600 millimeters front to back. I scribed a set of, a line here, a center line for a set of holes in the center of the board, 300 millimeters, and I laid it out from either side. Okay, now, this is gonna be a really good tip if you have been using the LR32 system. These parallel guides only go to 110 millimeter. So I don't have the reach from either side. So what I like to do is I'd like to take the router, and there's a little point on that, the 5 millimeter. So brad point. So what I like to do, and another way of getting a rough adjustment is, come in here, cameraman, that's my center line, see it? So I can get that right over there, like this, and I take it and I look down, it's exactly where I want it. I'll move it down here, and I'll nudge it over, so I have that center line where I want it. It's easier to even do the rough adjustment here. And I'll bring it, oopsie, I'll bring it right down, exactly where I want it, and then I'll lock it in. The next part of the equation is this. I will take these, I don't care what it says, but I'll lock it right here, just like that. And that is, and I'll do the other one the same way. And that way there, I can do all my panels and get that center line perfect. Okay, now comes the joinery phase. Now, a lot of the times, building a cabinet, whether up or lower, I used to use just a couple crown staples and 3 screws. So I'm still gonna use screws. But there was an inherent problem when I used to build cabinets like that. It was trying to align this edge banding absolutely perfectly flush. That is why I'm gonna use a domino. It'll give me more shear strength, but it'll also help align when I'm assembling that front edge, because I'm going to use the tight setting on the domino joiner. So the next thing I'm going to do is, this is of course my bottom, this is the inside, and this is the side of the cabinet with our system holes already bored. I'm going to put 3 dominoes in here, and I'll show you the right placement, or the way I do it. And I'll show you when we assemble how that'll all come together. Now there's another part of the puzzle that we'll also do, because this is my front nailer. And we're also going to put a domino in here, because when we go to assemble, we'll have this one in the first phase of assembly. We'll put a domino here and a couple of screws on this 100mm nailer for the front. Because when you open the cabinet or the doors reveal the doors, you'll see that nailer. So when I'm working to get a perfectly flush butt joint for my base cabinet, or any cabinet, I want my domino to go right in here. So on my sides, I will plunge vertically, and on my bottom, I will plunge horizontally. But I always work from the outside. Here's a quick tip for you. I use this every single time I use a domino. I mark my faces where I'm going to lay my domino plate. So it can be as simple as this. You can do a triangle like this, or sometimes I've just gone like that to make a mark. And what that does is I know my plate's gonna lay there. So I'm gonna label some different things here. I'm gonna write H for horizontal. Okay, and that's my carpenter's witness mark where I'm gonna lay my plate. I'm gonna put a domino here. I'm gonna use the flap here, edge of the domino here, and then I'll get one roughly in the middle at 300mm, because this is 600mm in overall depth. Okay, so because I did my layout and I took my time doing my layout, now it's just time to start up the domino joiner. And I'm just gonna talk it through real quick, and then I'll just start going at it. Hey, I'm gonna plunge horizontally on here. Quick reminder, this is the plate, this is the base, where I've labeled it everywhere. It's where I'm going to lay the plate. So now I'm gonna plunge horizontally. From the front edge here, I'm gonna use the flap right here, and that'll bring me right here to 37mm in. Now, I could use the flap over here. It would take me really close to the groove on the inside. So what I like to do is I like to use the side of the machine here. It's a great reference point, and then you see how it all lines up with the plate. It's real easy to do. And then the third one I'm going to put in is right here. I scribed half of 600 300mm. I scribed the center line, and I'll use that. Real easy to with the cursor. Now I'm going to do tight from the front end. Okay, from the front of the cabinet, and the rest I'm going to do loose. But every time I go against the edge banding, I will use the tight setting. And you'll see when we start to put all this together, the assembly will be effortless. Okay, so here is the final home stretch. A couple things left. The next one is I've already started a dry fit, but also we got to cut the back. Okay, now there's a reason we use the domino for joinery, and here it is. I mean, I got a clamp on here just to hold it together, but I wish I had feel-o-vision here. That seam is absolutely perfectly flush all the way around. So that way there, when I go to putting a few screws in there, it will hold together and it won't shift on me. And I will have a perfect flush edge, because that's all you really see. Okay, now let's measure for the back. Let's go step around here, and it's really easy. If you remember, the width here is, and I'll have it in the description for the bottom, it's 732, and that's what my nailers are as well. Okay, now, if you remember in the video, the depth of the groove is 9mm. So let's talk about the width first. Okay, and you always write these down after you make the measurement. So it's 732, and the depth is 9 and 9, so that's 18, but I don't want to cut it perfect because we're going to be slipping the back in and out during assembly and maybe on the job site to cut mechanicals out. So what I like to do is knock it down by a couple of millimeters on the width. So let's do the math. 732 plus, instead of 18, we'll knock it down to 16 millimeter, is 748. And I'll write that down right here. 748 is my width. Okay, because this is very important. Because we don't have a groove on that top nailer. Okay, because we're going to do a countertop nailer to here. We're going to capture the back. And we're going to do a wall nailer here. And we're going to put the kicker plate down here. What I call the kicker plate, it's another wall nailer. So when I measure this out, I'm just going to grab my folding rule. And it's really simple. Remember, that's 9 millimeter. But what I do is I just take my folding rule and I stick it down there and I read it to the very top. And the height is 758 millimeter. Now, there's a really important reason I write this down. And I also write, and I've always done this, VH, the vertical height. It's an abbreviation in my brain that allows me to get the proper cut. Because I'm just going to use this cherry, 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter thick. And I wrote down my measurements here. Now, I want you to do this. I want you to go into your kitchen or a cabinet in your house. And when you open up the cabinet, which way is the grain running? It should always run vertical. If it's going horizontal, whoo, it drives you crazy. It's not good for your brain. So I always say always rises. Okay? So that's why I write vertical height, because I have two different measurements here. So from here to here, I'm going to measure 758 because this is my grain running this way on the ply. And then I'll cut it down at 748 in width. So that's just a couple of things to remember when you're building a cabinet. Watch your grain. Okay, so let's start our assembly. I'm going to use these quick screws, self-tapping, self-countersinking with an impact driver and a number 20 Torx. And through the course of the assembly, you'll see where we place the screws. Good. So I got my countertop nailer right here, the front one where the edge banding is. Now I'm gonna do the sides to the bottom. And you're also gonna notice something. I've taken my STM table, my saw station, and I've lowered it to the lowest height, and I throw just a piece of plywood on here. It's lower, so I have better maneuverability with it. While I put in screws, I can rotate it, but it also is the right height for me for an assembly table. So one of the things I want to cover with you real quick, sometimes I'm pretty good with my eye. What I want to do is, come here, over here, Chris, so you can see this. I laid out, because half of this 18 millimeters, I laid out a quick 9 millimeter line. So now I don't even have to think about it. I just take my screw and bring it in just like this. So I get it right into the center of the board. Okay, so the last nailer I'm putting on is the back of the cabinet countertop nailer. And don't forget, because just in case somebody scoots in the kitchen and looks up in. That's why we put that edge banding on there. It just gives it a nice finish. The countertop's gonna go on top. But when we come over here, and I got a clamp holding this nailer in place, come over here so we could see this. Make sure you get this. See how the back is now captured? It's flush. Okay, and there's a reason for that. When I take this apart, I can finish everything flush, right? And I get to the install. What's nice about this is I can remove the back if I need to cut, like for an outlet. I could cut it flush. It makes it a lot easier, or I got to cut out my mechanicals for sinks. So that's why I like to do this 1/4 inch captured back. It makes it really nice, makes it easy to finish. I get a better installation cut. Okay, everybody, check it out. There's your base cabinet, frameless, with the additional half shelf holes in the middle. All the links and dimensions are in the description. There's more in-depth videos for each segment, so check it out. Thanks for watching, and be positive, stay sharp, and I mean wicked sharp.